Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I was always told I had a voice for radio, so today I am going to be bringing you a very special video talking about SP Pokemon. Now, I've mentioned these in a few videos, some of my history videos, and I get questions like, Ross, what are SP Pokemon? I don't quite get it. What's the deal? And you know what? I thought it was time to bring you a video explaining how SP worked. Not trying to go through every single SP card ever, just giving you an overview of the deck, how it worked, and why it was so good. And at the end of the video, we will go through some other big decks of the time to show you why it was so good. So, SP Pokemon were what we call owner's Pokemon. They belonged to a certain person. So this Luxray GL belonged to Volkner, and you can see his picture in the corner there. Now, don't worry too much about GL and FB and 4. GL is Gym Leader and G is Galactic and 4 is Elite 4. The most important thing is that whatever these letters were afterwards, they were SP Pokemon, and they were all basic. This Luxray is basic. This Garchomp is basic, despite the fact they are clearly evolved Pokemon. So starting off then with the trainers, SP Pokemon had a whole suite of trainer cards that gave them at times an unfair advantage, and it all started with Cyrus's Conspiracy. Search your deck for a supporter card, a basic energy card, and a trainer card that has Team Galactic's invention in its name, and put them in your hand. So what you would do is you would search for a basic energy, another Cyrus's Conspiracy, and then you would go and get one of these Team Galactic's inventions. We'll look at them in a moment. And we would call this Cyrus Chaining. Now, nowadays we use cards like Professor Sycamore to draw cards, but back then we had Uxie. Think of it like a Shaman, but you draw to 7 and it doesn't give up 2 prizes. And we had Claydol, who was huge draw power as well. So you didn't need to draw that much with supporters, meaning Cyrus Chaining was a very good idea. So, what about all of those Team Galactic's inventions? Well, we had Energy Gain. Energy Gain was a tool that you attached to your Pokemon and it reduced the attack cost by 1. So, for instance, this Luxray GL Lv.X, all of a sudden you can Cyrus for an Energy Gain and a Lightning Energy, and you've got him going in a single turn. This Blaziken FB Lv.X, you go for an Energy Gain and a Fire, you've got him going in a single turn. It was great. One card which drove everybody crazy was Power Spray. Now, you had to have 3 SP Pokemon in play for it to work. But if it did, your opponent tried to use a Poke Power, you used Power Spray, it failed. They bench an Uxie, you Power Spray, Uxie stays on the bench, but they don't get to draw extra cards. You could do this with any Poke Power, and it was brutal. People used to try and bait Power Spray by using a power they didn't really want to use, so that it would get power sprayed. So, for instance, there was one game where I would play an Uxie, hoping my opponent would spray it, because I really wanted to use Regice to switch the active Pokemon. We had Poketurn, which was a Super Scoop Up, but you didn't need to flip a coin, only for these SP Pokemon. Completely heal, reuse abilities, all of that could be done with Poketurn. And SP Radar. SP Radar was a very great card, which just allowed you to search for any Pokemon when you put a card back into your deck. It was like the very popular card BB Search, except it was an item card, so you could use it whenever you felt like it, and it was an item which was just almost a little bit too good. Just ridiculous. Put any card back in your deck and search for the SP Pokemon you want. Now, there were a couple of other cards, but they didn't see a huge amount of play. There was, for instance, Aaron's Collection, a supporter card that allowed you to search your deck for 2 in any combination of Pokemon, SP, and basic energy cards and put them into your hand. But then again, you could use Cyrus's Conspiracy to get a basic energy and an SP Radar, and it kind of did the same thing. Aaron's Collection did see some play, but it wasn't a huge card. Now, going into the main Pokemon, and again, there's lots of Pokemon here, so I'm going to run through some of the main ones. We had Dialga G and Dialga G Lv.X. Dialga G was great because it had Deafen. It was a metal and a colourless, but remember that's really just a metal and an energy gain, both of which can be got with a Cyrus. 10 damage, but your opponent cannot play any trainer cards or stadium cards from his or her hand during your opponent's next turn. That, ladies and gentlemen, was a little bit silly. Second strike was fine, 70 if they already had 2 or more damage counters on them, and you could use Crobat G to get the damage counters, more on that in a minute, but it was good. You could then use Dialga G Lv.X, which turned off all Poker Bodies. As I've said in videos before, abilities used to be Poker Powers if they were active like Uxie, and Poker Bodies if they were passive and were just always there, like Dialga. Dialga turned off Poker Bodies, and 4 energies a lot, but 80 damage, flip a coin until you get tails. For each heads, move an energy card attached to the defending Pokemon into the Lost Zone. The Lost Zone was basically like a discard pile, but you couldn't recover energy or anything else from it. It was lost for the game. It was, frankly, a little bit silly. But Dialga G had Special Metal, which reduced damage done, and you always had Poker Turn to try and heal Dialga. As well as using Deafen with Dialga G, it was just a little bit overpowered. We had Luxray GL Lv.X, who was really always the big one. Now, Luxray was fine, Bite for 30 was okay, but really here it was about the Lv.X. Flash Impact did 60, plus 30 to one of your Pokemon, but as we're going to see in a minute, Garchomp could completely heal all your SP, so it didn't really matter. And again, this was just Cyrus for a basic energy and an energy gain. But it had Bright Look. This was a format without Pokemon Catcher, without Lysander. So having Bright Look, which did the same thing, was ridiculous. Oh yeah, and it had Free Retreat. Now, in order to level X, a bunch of people have been asking about this on recent videos. Think of it like Break Evolving, but you can only do it when you're in the active. You've still got all the attacks of the previous level, but you gain attacks, you gain HP, etc. Unlike Breaks, though, they might change your retreat cost. So, Free Retreat, so you would get into the active with Luxray, Bright Look when you level X'd, and then you could just retreat Luxray, and then of course you could Poker Turn to reuse the ability. It was a very, very good card. Now, the main attacker for a lot of this run was Garchomp C Lv.X. Now, Garchomp C Lv.X was only played after Heart Gold Soul Silver when Double Colourless Energy was reprinted. Remember what I've shown you in these Pokemon so far. You want to go Energy Gain, Energy, Attack, and Garchomp can only do that with Double Colourless. With Double Colourless, you attach an Energy Gain, a Double Colourless Energy, and then you just hit for 80 anywhere on the field. And everyone's playing stuff like Uxie, which has 80 or less HP, etc, etc. Lots of KOs can be done here. We had lower HP. You could KO the active, but you could also KO the bench. You could really put your opponent in an awkward position. You could KO their Claydol so that they couldn't draw any cards in future turns. Or one thing you could do, because Claydol had a retreat cost of 2, you could use Luxray to Bright Look the Claydol into the active, and then use Garchomp to only hit the bench. While your opponent is stuck in the active, you're KOing the bench. That was something that got done. Garchomp also had Free Retreat, which is a bit unfair, although Garchomp is very fast in the video games. And he had the ridiculous ability Healing Breath. When you evolved into Garchomp C, remove all damage counters from all of your Pokemon SP. Completely heal everything. And don't forget, you can use Poker Turn to pick it up and reuse it. And when you did pick it up, you got that energy gain back to put it on a different Pokemon. But if Garchomp was only used after Heart Gold Soul Silver came out, what did we use before then? The answer was Blaziken. Blaziken FB had Luring Flame that was pretty good. Switch your defending Pokemon with the opponent's bench, and then outburns. You bring up a Pokemon and burn them. And you would usually do something like a Claydol, because Claydol had a high retreat cost and everybody played it. But the main attacker here was the Lv.X. Once again, we've got that same deal, where it's 1 basic energy and an energy gain, so you can search with Cyrus. 80 damage, but next turn any damage done to you is increased by 40, making Blaziken a little bit fragile. The good news is any damage done by attacks to a burned Pokemon is increased by 40, but only 40 can be added. This doesn't stack. So you would Luring Flame them up with Blaziken FB, and then you would Jet Shoot, and it would actually be 120 rather than 80. But when Garchomp came out, Blaziken didn't see no play, but Garchomp was just a much better version of Blaziken. In terms of common cards that were played with it, we had Bronzong G. Bronzong was really good because it allowed you to move an energy card from one of your Pokemon to another, one of your SP. Now, you then put 2 damage counters onto Bronzong, but remember, as soon as Garchomp comes out, you're healing that anyway. Luxray GL made all weaknesses ×2, which was not usually the case. Stuff like Machamp, for instance, stuff like Gyarados, you would use Lucario to up their weakness. Crobat G was a huge Pokemon. You played it down and you got to put 1 damage counter on the field, but you could use Poke Turn to reuse it. Toxic Fang was not a terrible attack. Again, you've got that same thing of 1 psychic energy and an energy gain, so Cyrus gets him going. Really good for high retreat Pokemon. When I played Donphan Prime, everyone started using Crobat G against me, which is why I played Ruins of Alph, so I could still one-hit KO with an Expert Belt. Retreat cost, decent HP, resistance to fighting, but really, it was all about Flash Bite there. One really fun card that Pokemon SP had was this Toxicroak G. Now, weirdly, this was given away free when you bought a book about Platinum, the expansion of the trading card game. And this book kind of sold out, and this card got quite expensive, but it was good. The ability allowed you to just flip a coin if heads, Toxicroak goes back into your hand. But the attack here was really nice. Psychic and a colourless, but you know by now, Cyrus for a Psychic and an energy gain. 20 damage, but if you were knocked out by damage from an attack the previous turn, 60 plus poison. It gave you a fighting type attacker, which SP didn't have any really great fighting type attackers. But even so, for essentially 1 energy, 60 plus poison, that, ladies and gentlemen, was pretty fun. Toxicroak G saw a fair amount of play. Honchkrow G was another card that saw quite a bit of play. It allowed you to search for up to 2 in any combination of Stadium or Trainer cards with Team Galactic's invention in their name, USP Radar, your Poker Turn, etc. And then you could just get them straight into your hand. And then for a basic energy and an energy gain, I hope you're starting to see a pattern here. You can just do 20 damage, or you can do 40 if they've got any damage counters on them. And of course, you would use Crobat G to put the damage on them, and then you would hit with Honchkrow G. One that didn't see play in a huge amount of decks, but was kind of a thing on its own, was Skuntank G. Once during your turn, if you have a Stadium card in play, now there was actually a Stadium card you could use here. You could use Galactic HQ, that whenever anyone benches a Pokemon that isn't an SP, they take 2 damage counters. So they put a Pokemon in play, they take 2 damage counters from Galactic HQ. You've then got a Stadium in play, so you can poison them with Skuntank. And then for 2 energy, remember energy gain, 20 damage, and if your opponent tries to attack, flip a coin. If tails, it does nothing. And you build damage up through poison and Team Galactic's HQ while they're unable to attack you. But a better attacker for this particular deck was Toxicroak G, who would just use Deep Poison for a Psychic and a Colourless, again, 1 Cyrus. And the great thing about Cyrus was you could literally play 3 or 4 different types of basic energy and just search them out with Cyrus. There was a special energy card, SP Energy. There was like a rainbow that didn't put a damage counter down, but only for SP. But with your Cyrus, you could just play a whole bunch of different basic energy. Toxicroak did 20 damage, 40 if they were poisoned, plus the poison, plus Team Galactic's HQ. Skuntank Toxicroak really was a deck on its own, rather than techs in SP generally. There was also a little bit of play for Chatot. Chatot was a fun little SP card, and firstly, when you put it from your hand onto your bench, you can look at the top 4 cards of your opponent's deck, put them back in any order, which is quite good. But what you could also use was Search and Escape for 0 energy, search for a trainer card, show it to your opponent, put it in your hand, and then put Chatot on top of your deck and shuffle him into your deck. The other thing that was really important when these SP decks ruled the format was the Garchomp wars. Garchomp, after Heart Gold Soul Silver, really was a ridiculously good Pokemon, but he was weak to colourless. Now, you could KO a Garchomp with a Garchomp, but we also had a couple of other cards that we would try and use to get the KO here. We had Ambipom G for a double colourless, or an energy gain colourless, 60 damage if they've got no energy attached to them. But because Garchomp would use energy gain, put a double colourless on and then discard it to attack, that meant you would be doing 120 and getting the KO. Some people would even just try and leave a basic energy on Garchomp to stop Ambipom. And the other thing you could use here was Dragonite, because if you put an energy gain and a double colourless, you were always doing 80 to an SP, and you'd get the KO on Garchomp. But we can also see that Crobat would be KO'd by this. Luxray, the non-Lv.X, would be KO'd by this. You see where I'm going with this. Many Pokemon would be KO'd by this. It was a really cool thing. Lucario, for example. Even something like a Luxray GL Lv.X, if you were able to hit 3 Crobats, including Poker Turns, you could get the KO here. And I'm going to give you one more Pokemon here, because we're running out of time. Video's getting too long, unfortunately. Staraptor FB. Now, Staraptor FB was fine, but we love Staraptor FB Lv.X. Once again, we've got free retreat. Here, really, I mean, for free energy, you can do 70 if you discard a stadium in play, and of course something like Gyarados that really wanted broken time space, you could discard that and do 70. But really here it's about fast call. Once during your turn you may search for a supporter card and put it into your hand. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a great Poker Power active ability. So, they were the main cards. There's plenty of others we could have talked about. We could have talked about Infernape Lv.X. We could have talked about Luxray GL. But the video's getting long, so we need to stop it here. But that, ladies and gentlemen, were the main SP cards. Now, sometimes you would play Luxray with Garchomp. That was the fastest version. Or you would play Luxray with Sableye and Cyrus's Initiative as a disruption deck. Or you would play Dialga G with Special Metal as a really tanky healing deck with Poker Turn. Or you could even play something like, you know, your Blaziken if you're expecting to be playing against cards that were weak to fire. And then, of course, you've got Skuntank Honchkrow, which did have I believe it won or got second at Worlds in Seniors, but it was never amazing in Masters. Some of the main decks of the era included Gyarados, which was really good. It hit for 90 damage when you got 3 Magikarp in the discard, 110 if you had an Expert Bout on there. But of course, Luxray, if you've got a Lucario in play, does 120, 1 Crobat will get the KO. Vilegar was a big thing here. They would use Spiritomb to block items in the early game and then build up a Vileplume to block items for the whole game, trying to get rid of stuff like your energy gain. And then they would attack with Gengar. This was difficult, but of course, all you would need is just a couple turns to set up, and you could always do something like KO the Vileplume with a Luxray using Bright Look. And then, of course, Machamp. Machamp was a great Pokemon that for 1 energy got a 1-hit KO on any basic Pokemon. What you could do here was play Unown G, which would block effects of attacks like Takeout. It was difficult for SP, but of course you could always use Unown G. You could use psychic attackers like Uxie Lv.X because you were using Uxie anyway, and it wasn't unwinnable, although again, you would need Lucario to double up that weakness. And personally, I was playing Donphan back then. Donphan, unless you were playing against a really tanky Dialga, had a great SP matchup. I don't know why more people weren't playing Donphan. I wish I'd started playing Donphan earlier. I could have had a much better season. So, That, ladies and gentlemen, is roughly how SP decks worked. I know we were a bit quick at the end going through those other decks, but we can't make a 2-hour video here. If this is the kind of video you like, let me know. I can do more of these history-style videos where I show you some of the greatest decks ever and explain why they were so good. SP was really a number of decks rather than one, but for a number of years, SP really ruled the format, and hopefully now you've got a much better idea why. Were you playing back then? Do you wish you were playing back then? Regardless, chuck a comment down below. I'd love to hear from you. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at the Wassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, you can do so at patreon.com/PTCGRadio. But the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.